When I was a kid, and even as a young adult, I had no fear of heights. I was always climbing trees, climbing all over the roof of our house, never had a second thought or any fear about it. Then, when I was 30, something happened that changed that. We were living in Maine. It was my wife Jeannie and our 2 kids. Our son David was 8 years old, and our daughter Brianne was 5. We lived in a house that had a fireplace, and the chimney was equipped with this interesting device. You know, chimneys get soot and stuff that builds up inside, and they need to be cleaned out pretty regularly. If you don't do that, it can be dangerous because the residue can actually catch on fire. And it wasn't unusual to hear about chimney fires sometimes when this happened. But this chimney was equipped with this thing that had a handle at the bottom down in the basement, and there was a cable that was inside the chimney. It went all the way up to the top, and attached to the cable was this stiff wire brush. So you could crank that handle around and the brush would travel up the chimney, brushing away all of that gunk that had built up, and then at the top it's supposed to reverse direction and come back down. And most of the time it worked pretty well. But there was this one time when it got stuck at the top, and I couldn't get it loose. So the only way to get it working again would be to actually get on the roof and reach down into the chimney. So I got the ladder out, and we had a large wooden deck on the back of the house, and that's where I decided to set it up. I leaned the ladder up against the edge of the roof. I climbed up and was just about to the roof level when the base of the ladder started sliding away from the house. And at that point, there was nothing I could do. There was nothing to grab onto. I just knew I was going down. So the ladder hit the deck first, and then I landed on my back on top of the ladder. It was probably about a 10-foot drop. And I wasn't really injured, hadn't broken any bones, but it knocked the wind out of me and I had to just kind of lie there for a minute. Well, of course, the rest of the family had heard the noise and had come running. They opened the sliding glass doors to the deck and saw me still lying there. I assured them I was okay, but this was still a pretty traumatic thing for David. At 8 years old, you really don't want to see your dad in a spot like that, so even though I assured him I wasn't really injured, he was still pretty upset. David's an adult now, of course, and I asked him what was the first thing he remembered about that day.
The part of the story that I remember firsthand is coming up the stairs, looking out the sliding glass doors onto the second floor deck that we had, and just seeing you laying there on your back, and I probably freaked out.
So I got up slowly and started to walk around, sort of doing a self-assessment to make sure I was okay. And I really was okay. The only sign that anything had happened would be a big bruise on my leg. So I went back down to the basement to see if I could figure out how to get the chimney brush unstuck. In the meantime, upstairs, my wife Jeannie could see that David was still shook up by this whole thing, so she had an idea about something that would make him feel better. She got a couple of pain pills like ibuprofen and gave them to him along with a glass of water to bring to me downstairs. That way he would feel like he was helping out with my recovery. But David didn't quite get the instructions that the pain pills were for me.
So later, I'm sure you were inside at this point, but when Mom gave me pills to give to you, I guess I didn't hear her say they were for you, and it made sense to me since I was freaking out so badly. I probably just thought, oh, these are to help calm me down. So I took your pain pills without realizing it.
Yep. 8-year-old David swallowed the pain pills.
So I think probably Mom at some point asked you, if I gave you the pills, and when you didn't know what she was talking about, she came to me, said, David, where are those pills I gave you to give Dad? And I probably freaked out 10 times more because I realized at that point they were for you. And I'm sure I just ran all the worst case scenarios through my head. It was not a fun time.
So now Jeannie and I are kind of panicking because a kid isn't supposed to take an adult's dose of pain medication. And David's really upset now because it's obvious that he shouldn't have done that. And he can see that Mom and Dad are worried. And we're trying to figure out what to do. Because this is way before Google. I think our only computer then was a Commodore 64, and of course we didn't have internet. But back then in the old days, we had this thing called the phone book. And in there was the poison control hotline, which we called, and it turned out to be not that big a deal. Everyone survived the trauma. But since that day, I have a weird feeling about heights. Not a big fan. And what happened to me wasn't even that bad. But imagine you're walking along a trail, and there's no guardrail next to it, and the other side of that trail is a 100-foot drop, which is about 30 meters, and the bottom of that is rocks. And suddenly you get too close to the edge, and you start to lose your footing. That's what happened to Gil. Real people in unreal situations.
There is a man standing in front of me in my bedroom.
My friend has been shot.
I'm literally inside the river, and I'm inside my car.
He had told me multiple times that he was going to set himself on fire.
If you say my name or try to look at me, I'm gonna kill you.
And he was just sobbing. He said, Mom, tell me you're going to be okay.
And I jumped on the hood of the car, and I held on.
And I looked into the garage, and he was hanging from the rafters.
I had somebody standing on my neck.
He's better to me dead. I want him dead.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Prior to this, had you ever broken any bones?
Up until 2019, I had never broken a bone before. It was kind of one of my easy go-to, never have I evers. But October of 2019, when I was 23, I did actually break my clavicle skateboarding. And less than 6 weeks later, I also fractured my skull biking to work and spent 2 nights in the same emergency room that I was in after I fell off the cliff.
Man, you've made up for a lifetime of no breaking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
Yeah,
huh?
I guess I decided I didn't have an interesting enough childhood, so I had to make up for it somehow.
Well, let's talk about what happened on that day. I mean, this was actually what happened before that day. This was on your 25th birthday. How long in advance did you plan this trip?
Yeah, so it wasn't exactly on my 25th birthday. It was the day before because I actually work 2 jobs. And because of that, the only day off I have in the week is Friday. So I'd kind of known ahead of time a little bit that I wanted to do something on that Friday since it was going to be my only day off. And I sort of knew that I wanted to go to the beach, go to the coast because we live an hour from the coast. It's beautiful. It's serene. It's just a nice place to go and have a quiet birthday, especially because the last 2 previous years I had kind of done big blowout parties for my birthday. And I wanted to kind of find a way to do a COVID birthday, something quiet, something just me and my partner that still felt as meaningful as having a huge party. But in terms of where we went that day, I didn't really plan it that far ahead. I didn't really even make up my mind about where I wanted to go until the day of. And we had been to Hug Point before, and I knew it wasn't a very far drive, so it's good for a day trip. And I knew that it was really beautiful. So I was like, screw it, let's just go back to Hug Point.
Yeah, it looks, the pictures I've seen, it looks really beautiful. What's it like? What's the park overall like?
Oh, God, it's really beautiful. The reason why we originally had gone to Hug Point, I think we originally went back in last October or something. And it's because we had stayed the night in our car in Cannon Beach, which is the town that's about 10 minutes north on the coast, the night before. And the thing that's great about Cannon Beach is that it has really good tide pools. And we had gotten up early. We'd gone to the Cannon Beach tide pools, and they were kind of crowded. And I was like, well, maybe I can do a deep dive on the internet and see if I can pull up some other good places to see tide pools in the area. And probably after about half an hour of searching, we had found Hug Point.
And there are tide pools there?
Yeah, there's tide pools. When you go at low tide, you can see sea anemones. You can see starfish. It's a really wonderful park. So if you go during low tide, there's actually an old road blown out of the side of the rock with dynamite that they used to use old cars on and horses on back in like the early 20th century. And you can get up on that old road and it'll actually lead you over to the other side of the cove that has like a waterfall and it has a lot of sea caves, and you can get down during low tide into a lot of tide pools in the rocks.
This sounds awesome. It must be a pretty popular place.
You'd actually be surprised. Not a lot of people know about it, so it's actually pretty quiet when you go.
And you had hiked there before?
Yeah, we'd hiked there before and we'd gone there early in the morning. So we had gotten to go take the road path over onto the other side of the cove and seen the waterfall and played in the caves and climbed on the rocks and, poked the sea anemone.
And who was with you that day?
So that day, it was my partner, June, both the first time we went and the day that I went for my 25th birthday.
And I got to ask you this, before this happened, how did you feel about heights?
I actually don't mind heights too much. I think my mom, when we were growing up, was so nervous when my brother and I were near anything high up that I think it was kind of like a pretty early act of rebellion for me to kind of like intentionally get up somewhere high to freak her out. So if I'm stuck at the top of a Ferris wheel, I'm not having a good time. But if I'm like climbing a tree or if I'm like on top of a cliff, I don't usually get like too wigged out about it.
Yeah, I saw some of the pictures and it looks like you're in some precarious positions, like on the side of a rock wall or something.
Yeah, I think I struggle more with having no fear than having fear. I think my mom would prefer it if I had more fear.
I think that's true of a lot of parents, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that day. Can you just take us through what happened?
So we'd gone to the coast and we'd gotten there pretty late in the afternoon. We probably didn't get there until about 1 or 2. And because it was way past low tide, we couldn't really get to the second part of the cove that you have to take the road trail to get to. So we were kind of just hanging out on like the initial part of the beach that you can reach without like hiking anywhere. We had taken some pictures on the rocks. We were just kind of like chilling, hanging out. We'd eaten some cakes that we'd picked up on our way out of town. And probably around 4 p.m., we were like, there's still daylight. It's still early. Like, I don't want to go home yet. Let's see if any of the trails that are kind of like in the grass, in the cliffs above the cove, if any of them lead over to the other side so we can get to the sea caves and to the waterfall. So it was not an established trail, but it was kind of like packed dirt trails where you can tell that they're pretty frequently hiked by people, but it wasn't anything marked. It wasn't anything official. So we were kind of like going through these trails and we were on them for probably about 10 or 15 minutes. We kept running into dead ends and we were having a good time because it was really beautiful. It was really nice weather, but we were still kind of like on the mission to get over to this other side of the cove. And we're running to dead end and we're running to dead end. And eventually I find a place where it looks like a trail kind of dips down and hugs the side of the rock wall and looks like it does go around to the other side. And I was like, oh, let's check this out. Let's see if it goes through. I climbed down and I was like kind of poking around it. My partner climbed down too. And I was like, it was a pretty narrow looking trail. It didn't really look very precarious when we were initially looking at it. It looked like pretty flat, didn't have a lot of rocks or obstructions, but it was pretty narrow. So I was like, like, hold on, babe, let me go first because this looks like it could potentially be slippery. Thinking from like where we were, not being able to see that if you did fall, you would go over a cliff edge, just thinking that like if you fall, you might have a tumble in some grass and rocks that wouldn't be very comfortable. And probably about like less than a minute in, probably like 5 or 6 steps in, I'm putting my weight against like the side of the rock wall on this little trail. And my feet just slip. It's like one foot slips, the next foot slips. And then I have probably about 10 feet or so of dirt and roots that I was trying to catch myself on to no avail and a sudden drop. It happened really within like seconds. And honestly, when it was happening, and probably for a good few minutes after it happened, I was completely convinced that it was a dream. Especially because I do tend to have stress dreams most nights. I'll dream about, crashing my car or falling off a cliff or getting shot. It's like my mind completely did not register that what was happening to me was real. It felt so surreal and dreamlike to suddenly be slipping and then have no ground under me. And the moment I went over the edge, I'm pretty sure I actually blacked out.
Do you think that was maybe because of fear, or maybe you hit your head on something?
I think it was kind of like, I do think it was more of fear. I think it was kind of just like a blackout of resolution of my mind registering that I just went over the edge and being like, all right, bitch, like, you're dead. Good night. Like, okay, like, we're fucking dead. Like, you went over a cliff. Like, either this is a dream and you're about to wake up, or this is real life and you're dead. So just go to sleep. And I remember waking up on the rocks and my head ringing and this memory of the fall playing back in my mind over and over again. And waking up still in complete belief that it was not reality, until I slowly became to the realization that, like, yeah, I just fell off a cliff and there is blood all over me and things on my body that are definitely broken.
What was the surface like where you landed?
It was all rock. So it was mostly smaller rocks, not like pebble size, but maybe like garden stone sized. So it wasn't necessarily so jagged that I had landed on boulders, but it was not like a soft landing for sure. And I had kind of pulled myself up and I could see that there was blood all over where I'd landed. And I think the first thing I felt was my face, and my lip had split completely down the middle. And it was so widely split open that actually felt to me like my lip was missing. It felt like I had completely bitten off my lip. And I could see, in the blood on the ground that it was looking a little chunky. So I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I bit my lip off. Like, I'm going to be disfigured. And my right eye was like so swollen and so crushed that I thought, like, trying to touch it and trying to feel my eyeball in the socket, it felt like I had crushed my eye and that I was going to lose the eye as well.
So you were really only seeing out of your left eye at that point.
Yeah, and I actually have really bad vision too. My prescription is like negative 3.25, which isn't as bad as they get, but it's bad enough that, like, when I don't have my glasses on, I can't see past a foot of my face. And at some point in the fall, I had lost my glasses, no idea where they went, never found them. So I could only see out of my left eye, and I couldn't really see at all from my left eye because my vision is, not ideal.
You're looking at all that blood knowing, hey, that's all my blood.
Yeah. And because, like, I couldn't see my face, but I could, like, feel on it that it felt pretty rough, I was pretty convinced that I was going to be disfigured. And I remember at one point even yelling up at my partner, like, babe, I think I'm going to be disfigured. Are you still going to love me?
That's when June called 911.
Yeah, so I think they had actually called 911 right away. Like, I remember waking up on the rocks. According to them, between my falling and me kind of responding to them was a couple of minutes. No one was timing that, so I'm not really sure how much time it actually was. It might have been a couple of minutes. It might have just felt like a couple of minutes because they were, scared. And it might have only been a couple of seconds, but according to them, I was out for a couple of minutes. And, like, the first thing that I kind of realized once I had woken up and come to the conclusion that I was in fact awake and not dreaming, the first thing I realized is that I could hear them calling my name. I could hear them, like, somewhere above me, like, going like, Gil, Gil. And I just managed, like, this super gnarly gargled out, like, help. When you're in that situation where you're just like, oh man, I'm fucked. Like, that really, you're just like, it just switches on. You're just like, that is the one word on the tip of my tongue right now is help me. Like, fucking come help me, please. I could hear them calling my name, and then once they could tell that I was kind of yelling back at them, the next thing I heard them say was like, "I called 911."
911, where's your emergency?
Hi, I'm at Hug Point.
Mm-hmm.
My partner and I were walking across the trails, and we walked to the right of the trail where the parking lot is, and they just fell down a cliff, and I think they might be unconscious.
Okay, so you're at Hug Point State Park, and which trail did you take?
Basically, when you get to the parking lot, you take a right.
Take a right?
Yeah, and it's like down a dirt path.
Wooden path. Okay, what's the phone number you're calling from? Okay, I'm going to get fire heading that way. Can you go to the parking lot to flag them down to lead them to where that person is?
Yes.
Okay, hang on one moment. Don't hang up. Station 32, respond to Hug Point in the parking lot. My caller's going to walk you down the path he took for a hiker that fell off a cliff and is unconscious. What's your name, sir?
No, I'm calling.
Can you hear that person talking to you, or are they unconscious?
I can't hear them.
Can you see them?
I can't see them.
Okay. Did they fall off the cliff on like the ocean side, or is there an east side to the trail?
Ocean side.
Is he in the water, or is he in like on rocks?
On rocks.
On rocks, okay.
Yeah.
Is he moving at all?
I think I hear a voice, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think I could hear screaming.
Okay.
We'll get right back to Gil right after this short break. All right, I've got a question for you. Do you ever feel like something is interfering with your happiness, or something is just stopping you from achieving your goals? Well, guess what? You're not alone. Personally, I'm a very goal-oriented person. I like to plan ahead and have a target, whether it's in the area of exercise or the growth of this podcast or really just about anything. But sometimes I feel like I just can't get out of my own way. And I'm not quite sure why something didn't happen as I expected it to. And in some cases, I'm too close to the problem to actually figure out what the solution is. What actually works is to talk with someone who can help. If you find yourself in a similar situation, my recommendation is that you try out BetterHelp. This is actual professional counseling done online and done securely. BetterHelp will start off by assessing your needs, and they'll match you directly with your own licensed professional therapist, and you can start communicating within 48 hours of signing up, and it's available worldwide. Once you're set up, you can log into your account anytime, day or night, and send a message to your counselor, and you can also schedule weekly sessions that can be by phone or even by video. You never even have to leave home. And if for some reason you want to change counselors, you can do that at no extra charge. Over 1 million people have benefited from the professionals at BetterHelp, and you can too by visiting betterhelp.com/whatwas. That's betterhelp.com/whatwas. This podcast is sponsored in part by BetterHelp, and since you're a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off your first month. So visit betterhelp.com/whatwas and start living a happier life today. And now back to Gil, who's waiting for help after falling off a cliff.
And it was really within like a minute that I could hear the sirens pulling up to the park.
It looked like there was no easy way for someone. I mean, June couldn't climb down and get to you at all.
No, they actually couldn't even see me from where they were. They saw me fall and then just saw me disappear and then couldn't hear me or see me until I woke up and started yelling for them. They actually had to backtrack to another, like further back on the trails to another part of the cliffs to get to a vantage point where they could see down to me. But yeah, they'd called 911 and they had to go back to the parking lot to, lead the paramedics over to where I was. And then because I was in such a desolate part of this cove, it took the paramedics probably 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes to figure out a way to get down to me once they actually arrived.
You really picked a spot, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did. But, I had so much time to kill down there. It's like I had managed to sit up like pretty soon after I woke up, and I kind of had tried to crawl around a little bit, but both of my arms are just really janked up, and I couldn't tell at that point like how bad my legs were.
Where were you feeling pain? What was hurting?
Everything. Thankfully, I think people are really afraid of being in a bad accident or dying, and my experience with like pain usually is you don't feel it until like at least 2 hours afterwards. My initial feeling waking up maybe wasn't pain, probably was tear, but it was like I would look down at my arm and could tell that was like pretty fucking broken, could tell that was totally twisted into a shape the human arm should not be twisted, but it didn't like I couldn't feel it yet. I didn't start feeling it until probably I got to the hospital. The adrenaline will do a lot for you. I felt like actually pretty fine the first, 10, 15 minutes I was up. I was like pretty broken up, but still trying to like crawl around on the rocks. I was actually like, I was pretty determined to find my phone because my phone had come out of my pocket when I'd fallen. And one of the first things I called up to June after, like, I confirmed they were there, I confirmed they had called 911, was like, babe, can you call my phone? Because I was just like, oh, man, like, okay, like, this is happening. I've fallen off of a cliff. I'm injured. My face might be disfigured. Like, my arm is definitely broken. Do I really have to buy a new phone, too? So in the time I was waiting for the paramedics, I'd actually, like, been kind of slowly inching around the beach, trying to find my phone, not being able to see jack shit because I'd lost my glasses. And I did actually eventually find it a couple feet away from me. And of course, I had like 20 missed calls from my partner, and they just kept calling and calling me. And it was actually real. And of course, my fucking phone was unharmed. Like, me broken, my phone fine. Guess that's a free plug for, Google Plus. But it was a huge relief to find it because my partner and I couldn't really hear each other that well because of how far we were. And when I did finally get my phone, they hadn't stopped calling me. And so I was able to pick up and actually talk to them. And they were like, paramedics are there. They're just like trying to find a way down to you. It's really steep. They're going to try to like grapple down.
That's incredible. So you were able to communicate with June the whole time while you were waiting.
Yeah, it was really nice. I was like, and I think one of the first things I said to them, like, once I finally had my hands on my phone, I think that's when the adrenaline kind of like started to drain out of me. And that's when I started to get really cold and really tired. And I just remember telling them, like, tell those guys to hurry up because I think I might die down here.
So the local fire department and first responders were able to eventually get to you.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get you out of there, though.
No, they couldn't. So eventually someone did manage to get down to me. According to June, the people who responded to my fall were the local sheriff, the fire department with their paramedics, and then a local rescue team who I'm still not completely sure if they're a volunteer rescue force or if they're someone who is employed by the county, since I'm sure a lot of accidents probably do happen in the area. And the first person to make it down to me was somebody from this local rescue team. And he came, he was the first person to talk to me. He's the first person to like check. And he came down. He didn't really have any equipment. So he's the person who just came down, looked me in the eyes and was just like, stay awake. I was like, first thing I said to him when he rolled up, I was like, I'm glad you're here, man. Like, I'm getting really tired and I don't know how much longer I can stay awake. And he was just like, he just looked at me and he's like, okay, stay awake. And the second person to make it down was a firefighter paramedic who actually did manage to make it down with some equipment. And I think first thing they did was like cut my jackets off of me. I actually had 2 jackets on because the Oregon coast is really cold. And he also brought down a stretcher. And I think they might have taken some vitals from me. But first thing they did was basically like cut my clothing off my body and like get me on the stretcher and try to protect me from the wind and the surf because the tide was rising too. And just try to wait for the Coast Guard helicopter to get into a place where they could pull us up. because this cove was so small and so kind of awkwardly positioned that it was probably another 20, maybe 30 minutes before I could actually get helivac'd up because of how difficult it was for the Coast Guard to pull the helicopter into a position where they could safely evacuate me.
Where you landed, how far were you from the water?
When I first landed was, I don't know. It's like in my mind, I felt like I was far. I felt like I was probably 10 feet from the water, but there was a couple of times where the waves would get close enough to almost lick me. And one point where the rescue team responder actually kind of like was guarding my body from the waves of the water because they were really like about to press up on me.
I know there's some pretty incredible film. The video, actually 2 different videos, one taken by June from that vantage point at the top of the cliff, videoing you being lifted from the ground into the Coast Guard helicopter. And then the Coast Guard had their own video from the vantage point of the helicopter straight down as they brought you up in the basket. Do you remember them putting you in that basket?
Yeah, I absolutely do, because that was probably one of the scarier parts of the entire experience, honestly, because it felt so precarious, because it's basically like they strap you to a board and then they tie the board to, the rope that then is used to hoist you into the helicopter. And it feels so precarious. You're basically swinging from a string as they haul you, another 100 feet in the air into this helicopter. And when they got me up there, they actually missed the door at first. And then when they could finally get a hand on me and pull me in, to do so, they kind of have to balance you on the lip of the helicopter and you're sort of hanging backwards out of it. And in my mind, I was I just had to keep telling myself the entire time, they do this all the time. They never drop anyone. I'm sure they do, they do this every week and they never drop anyone. It's okay. They're not going to drop you. But definitely feeling yeah, I'm about to be dropped out of this helicopter.
Yes, I was watching the video it's not a quick process. It's a very slow, you get lifted up into the, toward the chopper there. And I could see that they were having trouble getting the whole thing swung around to get in the door the right direction.
Yeah. So once we were in the chopper, I knew pretty much as soon as I got in the helicopter that I was going to be fine. Because I was once they can get me on an IV and stabilize me, I think I'm going to be okay. My only fear really with being afraid that I might die before that was that I did seem like I had lost quite a bit of blood and I was really cold and I was really tired. And I was I don't know at what point my body might decide, fuck it, it's not worth it. Let's just give up. As soon as I was in the helicopter, the next thing they did was stick an IV in me. And as soon as they got that going, I was cool, I know I'm going to be fine. And everything after that actually felt like it happened remarkably fast. I'm sure a helicopter ride from the coast to Portland can't be 5 minutes, but it felt 5 minutes. And they actually first took me up to Astoria, which is a little bit further up the Oregon coast, maybe an hour by car from where we were. They took me to Astoria first because from Astoria, they could transfer me into a Lifeline helicopter ambulance. And in that ambulance, I think that's when they finished cutting the rest of my clothing off and did more vitals. And at that point, I think the Coast Guard might have already given me some painkillers and some anti-nausea medication, and they gave me some more. And from there, it was just basically just snoozing until we got back to Portland. And they unloaded me at the Legacy Emmanuel Hospital, which is one of only 2 trauma centers in Oregon State.
And what were your actual injuries?
I do not know how I came out of this accident so miraculously unharmed. It's really, every single person who came into my hospital room told me, you're really lucky. So the only really serious injury I had is my right arm is pretty severely broken. Later, when they were looking at the x-rays for it and I asked them how bad it was, they told me this is pretty much as bad as we see. So that was pretty severely broken, mostly my wrist it had broken at my wrist, but the break was severe enough that it kind of gone down into my forearm. And the bone is split all the way through. And they weren't completely sure if the bone had broken through the skin or not, because there were some abrasions in my skin that they couldn't tell if that was from the bone penetrating through my skin or if I might have been cut by some of the rocks on my way down. So that's really the only bad one. And then other than that, I fractured my sinus, not displaced. I fractured my right orbit around my eye, not displaced. I fractured, I think, 2 of my ribs, also not displaced. And I fractured my sacrum, which is kind of like the back of your tailbone. And I fractured my left elbow. And all things considered, none of my fractures were displaced, just my right arm was like severely broken. And what I think probably happened when I fell is I think I must have broken the fall for my head with my right arm, which is why I think my right arm was as broken as it was, and my head, thankfully, was as damaged as it was.
It really is remarkable. I mean, you could have been paralyzed or brain damaged or just all kinds of stuff falling 100 feet onto rocks.
Yeah, really. It's like, I mean, I didn't even break any teeth, and, dental work is expensive, so I'm pretty happy about that one, too.
So are you back home now?
Yeah, I'm back home. I stayed overnight in the hospital for 2 nights. First thing they did when they got me out of the ambulance was kind of like give me some milk of amnesia and reset the break in my arm. And then they kept me in there for 2 more nights. And I fell that Friday and I got surgery not the following Monday, but the one after that, which was about 10 days after that. And that was just a day surgery. I didn't stay overnight. So I've been home pretty much every night since Sunday night after the fall.
And this, as we're recording this, it happened just a little over 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Yeah, not that long at all.
Are you mobile at all? Are you able to walk around or?
Yeah, I was really surprised by how mobile I am actually, because the first at least 24 hours in the hospital, I could not lift anything to my face. So my mom or a nurse had to give me all of my water, had to feed me. I thankfully was able to use the bathroom on my own, which I was pretty determined to do because I was not going to let a grown man wipe my butt at 25 years old. But yeah, I've been walking around okay. The first couple of days in the hospital, when I was kind of fresh from the fall, it was kind of uncertain how well I was going to be able to walk and if I was going to be able to take the stairs. But I'd say like 48 hours after the fall, I was actually walking around on my own pretty successfully. And now I walk on my own just fine. Like I went to the post office by myself yesterday and only almost tripped a couple times and freaked every passerby out.
Do you think you'd ever go hiking at that place again?
Yeah, it's actually the first thing I want to do when I recover, honestly, is because, it's like, especially because I've lost my glasses during the fall, I have no idea what the fall was actually like. Everyone tells me it was 100 feet, but I don't know how accurate that is, where they were measuring from. I feel like Hug Point has to be the first place I go back because I have to see how far it was when I actually fell and, maybe try to find my glasses too, because I'm still wondering where those glasses went.
How would you evaluate that? Would you go down to the place where you landed and then kind of look up at where you started from? Or
yeah, I would.
How do you figure that out?
I would definitely go low and look up. I don't think I would try to find the trail I'd fallen off again, except to maybe throw some sticks on it so nobody else tries to go down there. But yeah, I'll probably, if I go back there and try to figure out where I fell from, I'll probably go during low tide so I can take the proper route and go through the old automobile trail and try to find the rocks I fell onto, maybe trace it with some of the photos we have, and probably try to get a good look up there and see if I can tell where the trail was when I fell.
You've struggled with depression and even thoughts of suicide. How has that affected that mentality?
I don't know if it's affected the mentality so much as it has been a really awesome confirmation of how far I've come as an adult since when I was a teenager. Because as a teenager, I was not a happy kid and I was not a happy teenager and I was pretty suicidal as a teenager. And kind of just like kept sticking it through more out of just like fear than anything. And now I'm this adult who's really happy to be alive, who really loves my partner, who likes the house we live in. I love my job. I have things I'm excited about for my future and like a good relationship with my family. And how awesome it is to have that confirmation that I'm not somebody who wants to die anymore. I'm like a person who wants to live and really wants to live, because even when I was in a moment where my body really wanted me to like go to sleep and just give up, I was like, fuck you, I'm staying awake no matter like how much you want me to pass out. I'm staying awake because I'm turning 25 tomorrow and I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited about the future. So we're doing this, baby. A cliff is not killing us. We're staying alive.
Good for you. I love that. Well, you're going to, whatever your 26th birthday is, you've got you've set a standard that's going to be pretty hard to top, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find, a 200-foot cliff, I think.
Have you spoken with any of the first responders since that day?
No, I actually haven't. I even like the Coast Guard when they because the first time I saw the Coast Guard video is one of June's coworkers had sent it to them and actually said, it looks like they're getting ready to take Gil out because there's a crosshairs over me on the video. I later found it on Facebook and I'd even commented on the post being like, LOL, that's me. But never got any kind of response. But, if I ever run into any of those first responders who saved my ass again, I'll be like, thank you so fucking much. I'm sure the Coast Guard is used to idiots who fall off of cliffs and need to be helevaced out pretty regularly. But those guys who like made it down to me on the beach and, stabilized my ass, I would love to just like be like, thank you, dude. I would be I would be either dead or really fucked up if you hadn't been there. So, thanks.
Now, you mentioned earlier that your mom doesn't like for you to climb on things or get on things that are high up. Have you heard that phrase, I told you so, yet?
I think she's been holding that one back, but she does keep telling me that I really owe her when I recover. So I'm imagining at that point a pretty big I told you so is coming.
If you want to see a couple of really incredible videos, I have Gil's rescue videos posted in the show notes for this episode. You can see those videos along with some pictures at whatwasthatlike.com/76. And you may have noticed something new in this episode. This one was the first new episode with an ad from a sponsor. This podcast has been going on for almost 3 years now without any ads, and I'm guessing almost all the other podcasts you listen to have multiple ads with every episode. It's just something that comes with the territory. So I wanted to let you know a couple of things about this. First, if you hear me promoting something on this podcast, you can be sure that I've already researched the company and verified that it's something I can stand behind. Whenever possible, I will have actually even used the product or service myself so that I can talk about it from firsthand experience. I'm only going to promote products that I feel good about and that can be of value to you. And secondly, one of the benefits of being a supporter of the podcast is that you get all of the new episodes ad-free. With your Patreon account of $5 a month, you get your own private RSS feed, which means all of the ad-free episodes come right into your podcast app, just like all the other podcasts you listen to. And of course, you get all the bonus raw audio episodes that are only available to the $5 a month supporters. So you can hear the ads and learn about the products and services, or you can sign up as a patron and get all the new episodes ad-free, as well as the bonus episodes, which are always ad-free anyway. Either way is okay with me, because I'm just happy to have you as a listener, and I really mean that. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again here. We have a great group of listeners and lots of wonderful discussions in the podcast Facebook group. And a lot of the guests from previous episodes are in there as well. So it's kind of fun for everyone to get to know them. And we don't just talk about the podcast either. We talk about all kinds of interesting things, and we never talk politics. That's one thing I will always make sure of. It's at least one place on Facebook that will never have any political talk. So I invite you to join us. You can get in that group at whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. We're going to close out the show today with a short story from Tristan. So thanks again for listening. Stay safe, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hi, my name's Tristan, and this is the story of how I gave my parents their first gray hairs. Before this day, I had no significant health issues as a child whatsoever, and nothing significant to speak of since then. But this is the story from when I was 6 years old. My parents picked me up from my grandmother's house, and we drove out to the Clear Lake for a family day of fun in the sun. At this time, my mom was about 8 months pregnant with my little brother and looking forward to laying out by the water while she still had a chance before a newborn came. I had been running a fever at my grandmother's house, a fact she neglected to tell my parents before they allowed me to wade in the cold lake water. I remember getting my life jacket on and following my dad out into the shallow parts of the water where he showed me some tiny fish. I remember getting out of the water, my mom wrapping me in a beach towel, and laying back in one of the chairs we had packed. I even remember my mom letting me have a sip of her Diet Coke. Her lips are turning blue was the next thing I remember hearing. I could hear my mom yelling, but I couldn't see her. I couldn't see my dad. I couldn't see anything. And after another couple of seconds, I couldn't hear anything either. The next thing I remember seeing was an x-ray of my chest on the light table across from me in my hospital room. Now, normally you might think, okay, an ambulance was called and I was easily helped. Well, keep in mind, this was 1996, the days before everyone had a cell phone in their pocket. And we were at a lake in a part of the city where most of the homes were vacation homes, meaning they were empty at the time. My parents knew I needed to get to the hospital, but we were somewhere unfamiliar and I had no idea where the hospital was. So my dad picked me up and took me in his arms, along with my very pregnant mother, ran from door to door trying to get a hold of someone to call 911. They knocked on the door of 5 or 6 houses before spotting the driveway with the ambulance parked in it. By the grace of God, someone answered the door, and it was the wife of the pediatrician who was next door playing darts with the ambulance driver. Needless to say, they picked me up, and I rode with them into the hospital. My dad followed in the van that was almost out of gas. When I woke up and was cleared to go home, we were out of gas in our van. But the doctor who we'd seen earlier had a broken gas gauge, so gave us his extra gas can to get home.